Have you ever seen this shape bowl before and wonder how this could be made on a lathe? Stay tuned and see how I've done it.
This week's project you've seen me do before. It's going to be a saddle-shaped bowl, hopefully live edge, but maybe just natural edge. The difference being whether or not I can keep the bark. The bark is fairly tight. It's elm, and you can see it's not round. If I come across here, it's 2.5 inches narrower than it is long. So that's going to create the saddle shape. I'm going to go ahead and mount it on a woodworm screw, turn the bottom, and so I can reverse chuck it. It does have some checks here in the end, but I think they'll go away. I'm a little concerned about the bark lifting here, so I may not be able to keep it, but we'll try. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Oh, the other thing is this is still wet. It's been cut 4 months ago, and it's at 20%. So it's not soaking wet, but it's wet enough that it will move, and it could crack, although elm's not too bad for cracking, but it will move. But the fact that it's not round, it's saddle shaped, will hide most of the movement. I didn't show it, but the reason for drilling a hole here first, it's going to make it square to the bottom, and it allows my chuck to sit on there. You want the jaws of the chuck to rest on the wood, not just to rely on the woodworm screw. But now I have a center hole, so I'll go ahead and drill the woodworm screw and we'll get that mounted up.
So here I am just mounting it on the woodworm screw. I just put the speed down very, very slow, hold the block of wood up, and it tightens up. Now I did stop it here. It didn't go from me holding it to this fast speed. I did stop it in between. I just didn't show that part. So now I'm just working at the bottom, just leveling it out a bit and cutting a tenon. I don't keep it on a woodworm screw any longer than I have to. So at this point, I'm just going to, once I get it flat, I'm going to cut my tenon so that I can get that reversed and in a chuck, so it's much more solid than it is on the woodworm screw. Especially with something that's out of balance and as heavy as this piece, I don't trust the woodworm screw.
And here's the disadvantage of these types of bowls. Right now it's a bit out of round, so I can't turn it very fast. Once I get it a bit rounder, I should be fine. You notice I'm a little bit thicker here than I am here, so that's contributing to it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start working this way down to try and save the bark. If you come up, you'll just push the bark off. But if I cut in here and come down, I may be able to save that.
So here I am starting to rough it out. It still is not round. You can see I'm bouncing around a little bit, and my speed is not up very fast. And that's one of the things that makes it a little bit rough going until I get my speed up. So you can see here I'm just touching in this one spot and then directly opposite of that as well. The rest of the time I'm not doing any cutting. So until I get down to the point where I'm cutting most of the time, it's going to be a little bit slower going and a bit rougher. Here we've skipped ahead quite far. You can see at this point I've given up on trying to keep the bark. It was coming off in fairly large pieces, and it would have been very difficult, or if not impossible, to save. The other thing you can see here is I've kept my tailstock engaged because I do have a tenon on this, but until I get some weight removed, I want to keep as much support as I can. So at this point, I'm just cutting that central tenon down from the livestock so that I can have more access to the bottom of the bowl, and it also removes more weight. Weight spinning around creates a lot of force, which is directly transmitted to the tenon, which I'm holding the bowl in. Now I'm just going to remove that very last little piece that's there, cut it off with a saw, and now I have a bowl that's fairly easy to manage. The other thing is I turned that centerpiece as a tenon as well so that I can reverse it a second time. I don't usually do this, but I still had a pretty rough bottom and I wanted to clean that up. So by keeping a tenon on both ends, inside and outside, that allowed me to clean that up. Now I'm starting the sanding on the outside. I won't show all this. I believe I started at 80 grit and I worked my way up to 600. Here I'm just putting a bit of sanding sealer on it. This wood did have a bit of soft spots, and it was because it was spalted, the wood got a little punky. And in order to get a good surface on that, smooth sanding, I put the sanding sealer on it, which just stiffens it up. Sanding sealer is shellac based, and it just stiffens the fibers up. Once that sanding sealer is dried, I can go back to just using my scraper to try and clean that very top piece off. You can see that down here just in the bottom corner. And I'm just taking my scraper and making very, very light passes. As Bob Ross would say, just a whisper and a hair. That's pretty well cleaned it up. Those spots that were tore out because of the punky wood. And at this point, I can go back to sanding. Again, just finishing up the outside. It's all sanded now. I'm done with the sanding sealer, done with sanding it. Now I'm going to putting on a tung oil. That is my preferred finish on this type of a bowl. One that's natural edge like this makes it very difficult to apply any friction finish, like you saw in my last video, the wax and abrasive paste. The other advantage of tung oil is that even after applying it, if I do see spots that need to be touched up a little bit, I can sand them even while wet with the tung oil and then go back and reapply if necessary. And you'll never see those places that I've gone back. Now that the outside is finished, I'll move on to the inside. So I start up at the rim. I always want to finish the rim first because with the centerpiece still in place, that helps maintain the stability of the bowl. So I work the rim down about as thin as I want it to be. Then I go and finish taking out the center. Now that I have some weight removed and I have a better shape, I'm able to turn the speed up. At this point, I was up to 800 RPMs, whereas at the beginning, I was at 200, 250. But even at 800, what I saw was as I sped it up, I was getting vibration around 500 RPM, but as I continued to speed it up, it got through that spot and then it actually settled back down. And you can see here, it's cutting very well. You can see the chips coming out. It's removing a lot of wood in a very short period of time. And this is using my bowl gouge. Excellent tool to remove a good amount of bulk wood. I did end up going back and just picking up the rim. I wanted to get that a little thinner yet. So a good tool to do that is the carbide tool. It tends not to jump around and you can plunge straight in and establish that rim. Once you come down a little ways and have that rim established, then you can switch to your bowl gouge. The bowl gouge It's a lot easier to use when you can ride the bevel, but that's the problem. In the very beginning, at the top of the rim, you don't have anything for the bevel to ride against. You can see here, now that I have the wall established, I can easily switch to my bowl gouge and core out the bulk of that material that's left. Again, probably the most satisfying part of the video to watch. You can see the wood coming off of this. It's coming off fairly quickly. I have sped this up a little bit for those that are interested. This is about 2 times speed, but still, it's removing wood very, very quickly. With this shaped bowl, I do end up with fairly straight sides and a fairly large flat bottom. Later on, as I go to sand this, that does make for a little bit of a difficult area to sand because the transition from the walls to the base is almost a 90-degree turn. In hindsight, I probably would have been better off to round this over a bit and made a bit easier job to do some sanding. Okay, the inside is done. Coming down this wall, I'm pretty uniform. Maybe just a bit thinner here, so starting about here, I could probably go a little bit thinner. The bottom is good here, so there's a bit of a hump right there. I'll take that out probably with a scraper, take that down a bit, but that's pretty good. I'll have to use my scraper on the sides here a bit as well. I've got a bit of gouge marks, but overall this bowl is almost done. Okay, the inside is all finished and sanded. The wall thickness is quite uniform. I sanded the bottom here. I had a little bit of soft punky areas here. When you've got those, it's hard to get rid of them. So what I did is I put some sanding sealer on it, which stiffens them up. And that makes it easier to cut and sand. Still got a little spot right there. I want to probably just hand sand. I don't know if you can see it. I can see it when it's spinning, but there's a line right here, which is a circular. And it's a transition point from the flat to the side walls. It's difficult to sand. Again, I'll probably just have to hand sand it to get rid of that line. But other than that, it's pretty uniform. And for the first sanding, that's in pretty good shape. I'll touch those spots up and then work my way up through progressively through the grits and then apply a finish. So one of the last steps is to remove the tenon that I used to mount the bowl. I do have a center marked on it, so it makes it easy to remount. I just bring my live center up into that spot, and as you can see here, it's fairly well balanced. Once I get this on the lathe, then I just take my gouge and just slowly work away with fine cuts and remove that tenon. Let's talk about this bowl. I think it turned out very well. It's got some markings to it. It's got some bug holes, and it's also got some spalting. And it turned out to be 12 inches in diameter in one direction and 10 in the other. As you saw, the bark did come off, so it ends up being natural edge, but it still has some remnants of the bark, which adds some color and some texture. Overall, very pleased with the way the bowl turned out.